Here inside the source code file for my circular buffer of T, I need to start thinking about an interface definition that can describe different types of buffers. And just by knowing what my application does and looking at this definition of circular buffer, I have a pretty good idea that most people will need to write to a buffer, most people will need to read from a buffer, and there's probably cases where someone needs to check if a buffer is empty or not. So going with those three things, I could start off very simple and create an interface definition, iBuffer. And ultimately what I want to do is, instead of passing around arguments typed as circular buffer, I want to be able to hand things off to other components in the system just as iBuffer. So they don't really know if it's going to be a circular buffer or a maximized buffer or a file system backed buffer. They don't need to know those details. They just need something that will allow them to read and to write and to check if something is empty. So let's add those members to the interface definition. IsEmpty is very simple. It's a property that returns bool. I just need a getter for that property value. And now anything that is an iBuffer will have to have that property. I can also specify the write method. And this is the first place where I run into a decision. What is it we're going to write? Are we going to be writing objects into the buffer? Well, no, I want things to be strongly typed, just like the circular buffer is. Of course, I don't know what type I want this iBuffer to work with. I don't know if it's going to work with ints or doubles or date times. So once again, I can use a placeholder here, T, because interfaces can take generic type parameters. I have an iBuffer of T, and the write method will take a value that is typed as T. We'll figure that out later what T actually is. Someone else will plug that in, and we'll have a read method that returns T. So just given those three definitions, the client code could say, I don't care what you pass me, as long as you pass me something that implements iBuffer of double. And you can see all the code inside of process buffer is happy. Same here with the process input. Give it something that implements the iBuffer of double interface. And those two methods are happy. Of course, calling those methods, this code is an error right now because a circular buffer does not implement that interface, but that's easy to change. A circular buffer of T implements iBuffer of T. And now a circular buffer is an iBuffer. And over here in the program, the calls to process input and process buffer, they're passing a circular buffer, which is an object that implements iBuffer of double. Once again, the T has been replaced by a double. And just so you know, another easy way to have created that interface would have been to come to circular buffer, right-click, say refactor, and extract interface. So here's where I could have picked my interface name, just iBuffer. I could have checked off the members that I wanted on that interface definition, and Visual Studio would have pretty much written this interface definition for me and put it into a separate file. We did it by hand just so you could follow along. And having this interface definition, again, it's nice. It's a layer of indirection between the client code that needs to use my collection and the ultimate concrete type that I use to implement that interface. So now I can swap out circular buffer with some other type of buffer if I want to create it. Let's actually try that out next.